Hello, everyone. This is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love, and thank you for being in Soul Talk. I would like to present you with Deb Krier. I hope I
You did?
perfect. And let me tell you a little bit about who she is, but she's going to explain us more about who she is and with her own words. She's an entrepreneur with a background in communications, and she's a cancer advocate. Deb, thank you so much. Thank you for
Oh,
being so.
thank you, Monica. I am so honored to be a guest. I was looking through your other podcast episodes and absolutely wonderful. You speak with some fabulous people. So I'm very honored to be a guest.
Thank you so much, Deb. Deb, tell us a little bit about. I know you're an entrepreneur that with a
Mhm,
background in communications,
mhm.
and do you apply that to your own to the cancer advocate?
I did. So my background is that I have my own company. It's called Wise Women Communications, and it's a full service marketing firm. 9 years ago, I was diagnosed with cancer. And my technical diagnosis, the full mouthful, is stage 4 metastatic triple positive breast cancer. And then I've had two other diagnoses along the way. And as part of that, there have been lots of ups, lots of downs, right? And one person who is my business coach, and I value her opinion very highly. She told me, she said, you didn't go through everything that you've gone through without using it to help others. And so that was when I decided, and it took some arm twisting because I told her I don't want to be cancer girl. But I also realized that if I could help others along this journey, that was what I wanted to do. And so it's been about 3 years ago we started TryingNotToDie.LIVE, and it's all about advocating for ourselves, and making sure that we are the people making the decisions regarding our treatment and things like that. It also helps those who are caregivers, friends, whoever, of someone who has cancer. One of the most frequent questions I get is, my friend, my spouse, my coworker was diagnosed and I don't know what to do. And so we help them. And then we also work with medical personnel on how to remember that we're actually people and not a diagnosis. Just cancer is just a little part of who we are, right?
Yes, and I'm so happy that you're actually doing that because yes, and I believe it's more increasing more the cases
Mm-hmm.
of cancer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when the moment the people hear the news, like you have cancer,
Yeah.
it's
Mm-hmm.
devastating for
Right.
anybody.
They think they're dying. And unfortunately, in many cases they are. But yeah, I mean, the stats are now about 1 in 2. And a big part of that is, now I also many years ago worked for an oncologist and I worked for the American Cancer Society. So I know just enough to be dangerous, right? But it was, a big part of why you see increasing numbers is because we're getting a lot more of early detection, which is a good thing because the sooner you catch something, the easier it is to treat. But there is, there's an awful lot of people who will, if they don't have cancer, thank heavens, but they will know someone who does.
Yes, my mother-in-law has cancer, so
So sorry. Mm-hmm.
so yeah, and several times, and
Mm-hmm.
that's it's so demoralizing for the people because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I did already the chemo, the
Right. Mm-hmm.
surgery, I should be fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he comes back.
Right. Well, and initially it's, what did I do wrong? Right? Did I do something to bring this on? And of course we don't. It is something that happens, just because we all know people who were like, pack a day smokers who don't get cancer. And and other people who, yeah, it is just something that happens. Now granted, there are things like exercising, eating well, those things that we should be doing anyway, that might add to it. And obviously there's some genetic components, but yeah, I mean, it just happens, and it's never our fault, but we do blame ourselves.
That is true. I am a I used to have lupus, RA, and fibromyalgia, and they told you you are
Mhm,
not going to
mhm,
heal with those things.
mhm, mhm,
And the doctors will tell you and try
mhm,
to program you that
mhm,
basically you're doomed, like
mhm,
cancer.
mhm,
Just going to last longer, but it's going to be terrible,
mhm,
you know.
mhm,
And I healed myself from all that.
mhm.
I don't take any medications. I haven't had a flare up in 15 years and things like
Yay.
that. But it was a lot of inner work.
Right.
With days,
Mhm,
it was one of my biggest teachers in her
mhm,
book, You Can Heal Yourself.
mhm,
And I came to understand that many of the sickness that we get ourselves,
mhm,
it is through emotions, through our
mhm,
emotions.
mhm. Right.
And cancer is no different. It's an
Right.
emotional
Right.
sickness.
Yeah, we are in stressful situations. We don't eat well, we don't sleep well, all of those things. And so maybe something that would not have happened before does, because we're not doing that. And obviously our minds are incredibly powerful. And when we believe we're going to be bad or it's going to be good, that's the thing. And that's one of the things that I tell people is it's all about how are you going to live. That's the and it might not be long, but how are you going to live during that time frame? Are you going to embrace life? Are you going to do everything that you possibly can, or are you going to go nap? And of course we all know people that live their entire life going right.
Yes, that's all right. My husband, he called himself a professional pessimism.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we
Hmm.
were talking about going to visit some volcanoes, close to volcanoes, and he told me,
Hmm.
"Well, would you throw me there?" It's like, well, you're a professional pessimist.
Hmm.
Instead of thinking all your life
Hmm.
negative and pessimist,
Hmm. Hmm.
throw you right now to the
Hmm.
volcano and that's done. You know,
Right. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
for you.
Puff. Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
you can change the way you observe
Hmm.
life,
Hmm.
and
Right.
there's no necessity to throw you into a volcano.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. And we all know the people who are gloom and doom, right? My mother was like that. And she worried when she didn't have anything to worry about. But it was, people who go through life like that, and let's be honest, we all have bad days. you know but it's there's a difference between a bad day and a bad life. And it's all about making that choice. How are we going to live our lives?
Yes, I love the part that you put it here in the notes about living is the only cure for cancer.
Hmm. Right. Right. You might still have it, but how are you living with it? It's like I said at the start, it's just a part of who we are. It's not our entire existence. And so, and because I was diagnosed with stage 4, technically that is not considered curable. But I also don't have to pay that much attention to it. Now I do what I'm supposed to, and I actually had treatment yesterday. But it's not going to rule my life. And so, it it's just something that is a part of me. And now I have to acknowledge it. I have to acknowledge the changes that have come about because of it. But you adapt, and we adapt all the time, especially women, right? We are so good at adapting and changing and moving along, that's what we do.
How many people, without knowing that they're gonna get into a car accident and die the
Hmm.
next day,
Right.
they don't enjoy this moment.
Hmm. Right. Right. I tell people I could get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Exactly.
I mentioned my mom. She passed away last March. And I talked to her on the phone. She lived in Kansas. I live in Atlanta. And I talked to her on Monday. And we had one of the funniest conversations, one of the best conversations we'd had in a long time. Tuesday, she went out to lunch. She was 91. She went out to lunch. She did a weekly shopping on Tuesday, and Wednesday by noon, she was gone. And I think it was obviously a cardiac event, but I think she decided it's time. I'm done. And that was okay. She made that decision that she had done everything that she had wanted to do. And the funny thing was she had her entire funeral written out, made it very easy for me. And she was just, that was one of those people, and she was just like that. But she also was the person that bad things, she always thought bad things are going to happen. And then she would say, well, since, if it didn't happen to her, then it was going to happen to me. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not the way. But yeah, it's all about what is our philosophy of going through life.
Yes, because or else you're not enjoying today for thinking in tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That
Right.
is just going to create more anxiety.
Right. And it's funny. People ask me about my long-term, say, business goals, right? And it is kind of hard to plan long-term. There is that shadow that's there. But so I might not say, well, in 10 years, I'm going to be doing such and such, but I'll say in 10 days, I'll be doing whatever. In 10 weeks, but I'm also not going to just stop. And it's really funny. I have in my mind a vision of myself, and I have no idea where this came from. I have a vision of myself at 97. And I see that little person. I just see that little 97-year-old in my head. Like I said, I have no idea why. I have no idea why 97. I mean, all of these various things, but she's just going strong. So, I figured that's okay.
That is very possible to happen. Why not?
Right.
And something that you put me in the notes, it is the point that is, I'm not fine, and that's perfectly fine.
Right. To me, fine is a 4-letter word, right? People say, how are you doing? And the first thing we say, fine, and most of the time we're not, because, we can be really good. Fine is kind of average to me, right? And so we could be doing really well, or we could be not doing well, but we will tell somebody fine. And whether that's our doctor, our friends, our loved ones, all of those, they will say, how are you doing? And now, the lady at the grocery store, if she says, how you doing? It's okay to say fine to them. They don't want to know. But everybody else, they deserve our honesty. And we deserve to be honest with them. So, don't say fine. Even if you are feeling whatever it is, I tell people I'm hunky dory. And they know if I don't say I'm hunky dory, I'm not having a good day. But yeah, what are the other words that we can be using besides fine?
We tend to be in automatic. And that's how we live day after day. And then that's why we realize, like, oh my God, 2024, it just was
poof.
Precisely because we were in automatic. Because we were actually present and we are checking in ourselves. How do I feel? Not only waiting for someone to ask you, your best friend that asks you, like, how do you feel? Oh, I can say this. No, ask yourself, how do I feel? What is this emotion that is making me feel comfortable? We will have less traumas and more less baggage that we were carrying through the rest of our lives. And probably we will have less sickness too.
Right. And I had someone tell me this, and I just thought it was wonderful. They said, give yourself the grace to be honest with yourself. If you're not having a good day, it's okay to be honest with yourself and say, I need to nap. I need to do whatever I need to not do, right? That's one of the things that we do. We keep pushing and we keep pushing and we keep pushing. And sometimes we just need to say, no, not today. It's not going to happen. And I tell people I'm like a kindergartner. I usually have to nap, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I won't feel guilty because of that. But yeah, if we're not honest with ourselves, how can we be honest with anybody else?
I totally agree. And also in that part of the honesty is like, if you want to cry or actually go and yell outside,
right. Yeah.
Whatever it is important to honor that emotion.
Right. I tell people having cancer, and especially having a serious diagnosis, is an awful lot like grieving, right? We go through all of those stages: anger, denial, bargaining. I will eat well for every day the rest of my life if you make me healthy, right? All of those various things, and they'll go away for a while. And just like grief, they'll come back. And so it's okay. Our lives have changed. Even if you had a great outcome, your life still changed when you got that diagnosis, and it's okay to acknowledge that, because I was a friend of mine talks about the follow up, the checkups that she goes to, and she's told she's okay. And she said the whole time she's waiting for them to say she's not okay. And that's a hard thing to live with, but it is there. But she acknowledges that, and she breathes that sigh of relief. Now, she's not wishing to not be okay, right? But she also knows that it might not be. But it's very interesting when we have something like that. I'm sure the same is true for our loved ones. They're kind of waiting for something also. I remember when I had some catastrophic complications when I had my first and only chemo. Almost died several times. Spent a lot of time in the hospital, and my mother came out to stay because I'm an only child, and she had to come out and take charge, right? And my husband wasn't real thrilled with that, but she had to come out and take charge. And finally, after 4.5 months, I said, "It's okay, you can go home." And she said, "But what if something happens?" And I said, "Well, it will, and we'll deal with it." And she actually never came back, because I never had anything that was bad enough for her to come back here. But yeah, we have to just keep going and living our lives, and knowing, okay, we don't know what's going to happen. And but we can't hide.
How, how do you deal as a person with a family that it is have cancer, a friend or someone that is close to you? What words we use? How do we support?
I think it's harder in a lot of ways for them. Um, I could not have made it through everything that I did without my husband. He was that rock. Um, I can't imagine when he had to call my mother and say, "You need to get on the next airplane, and you're not going to get here fast enough." I mean, they had literally given me hours. And I remember thinking, "Excuse me, I get to vote." But you know, it hurts me when I have something going on. So like I might have a pain, or I might not be feeling well. And so I'll make a face, or I'll, whatever. And to see his reaction, because he immediately is back in that, "Oh my God, it's going to be bad again." And so I don't try and hide anything from him. But it's very stressful. I know it's very hard on him, because he's waiting for something to happen also. And so I try and reassure him as much as I can, but it is hard. The only thing I think that would be worse is if it were your child. I can't imagine going through, is something going to happen with my child again?
So how we can be a better support for them?
Be open and honest, right? And uh, one of the things that I try and do with the caregivers, with people, is I ask them, "How are you doing?" I have a friend right now who, he's a very good friend. He just got a diagnosis not real long ago, and he's pretty much okay with it. He's like, "Okay, we'll deal with this." But his wife is not doing well. And so I've been reaching out more and more to her, just to give her moral support, give her virtual hugs, because she's not here. We tend to kind of wall ourselves off, and so it's how can we let them know that we're there for them? How can we reach out? How can we let them know that? I also tell people, don't just say, "Monica, tell me if there's anything you need," because your brain is not grasping any of this, right? But if I say, "Can I bring you dinner on Thursday?" then you can say yes, no, or whatever. And so give concrete examples. Some are really basic. Like I have a friend who, she was a caregiver for her husband, and he did end up passing away. But she said one time her friends appeared, and she said She wasn't expecting them. They knocked on the door and and they said, "We're here to clean your house." And she said she was mortified initially. And then she thought, oh no, it needs cleaned. And because she'd been focusing on taking care of her husband, right? And that just meant so much to her that they not only thought of it, but they did that. And you might have to arrange for a cleaning service or something like that. Now, sometimes it's not good to just spring that on people. But yeah, just kind of be there for them. And sometimes they don't need to talk. They just need your presence. Ask to go for a walk. Ask to sit with them. But ask, it's okay to ask. I think we all think, well, we don't want them to feel worse, so we're not going to talk about it. And that's where it is very much like grief. When we've lost someone we love, we don't say, how are you doing? Ask how they're doing, because then they get the choice to respond. They can give you a big answer or a short answer. And it's okay just to say, I'm really sorry you're going through this.
And it's like a grief in a way.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that you want to cry, you're
Mm-hmm.
grieving. And the people like, oh, don't cry because you make me sad.
Be strong.
Don't be there.
Right. Yeah, it was funny when I was first diagnosed, I was mad. I literally told the doctor, I'm sorry, I don't have time for this. And I'm not somebody who cries. I mean, that's just not what I do. But it's whatever you need to do, you need to do. And I feel quite certain that my husband, my loved ones did cry. I had a friend of mine who came to visit me in the hospital, and I looked bad. I had lost all my hair. I had a tube in my nose. I looked like I was about to die. And she walked in and she burst into tears and she walked back out. And I could hear her out in the hall, and she gathered herself and then she came back in. And she apologized, and I said, no, don't apologize. That was what you needed to feel. And I think that's the thing, is we need to, if we're giving ourselves grace, we need to give other people grace too. What are they feeling? Are they and it's okay to add humor into, and so sometimes they might make some inappropriate jokes, and you're like, okay, yeah, if they're sad, if they're angry, it's okay for them to feel that.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Mi nombre es Mónica Ramírez, la guerrera del amor. Los quiero invitar a un diplomado que es de transformación en metamorfosis, como mi libro que acaba de salir. Pero en este diplomado que vamos a hacer es por 12 semanas, va a ser conmigo, en línea. No tienes que hacer esto solo, porque yo anteriormente me sentía que yo no valía, que yo no era suficiente. Entonces, ¿cómo me iba a traer realmente la vida que yo quería? Tuve que hacer precisamente este tipo de transformaciones y el trabajo interno para poder salir de donde me encontraba, dejando ir todos los traumas ancestrales que yo venía cargando, como todos ustedes, entender que era un programa para empezar. Y como programadora neurolingüística aprendí precisamente a remover esos programas y a poner los programas que yo quiero tener en mi vida, para que mi experiencia sea muy diferente a la que fue. Si quieres aprender a dejar ir las culpas, las vergüenzas, los miedos, el miedo, el juicio a los demás o el miedo de ser exitoso, porque muchas veces nos saboteamos a nosotros mismos. Soy programadora neurolingüística, soy hipnoterapista, soy life coach, también soy especialista en creencias limitantes y mucho más. Y estoy aquí realmente para servirte. Esta es mi misión de vida y mi propósito de vida. Y lo quiero compartir contigo. Empezamos el 27 de febrero a las 7 de la noche. ¿Quieras unir a nosotros en este grupo que vamos a hacer? Que empezamos muy pronto. Mi nombre es Mónica Ramírez, la guerrera del amor, y únete a este programa de transformación en metamorfosis. Este diplomado realmente va a cambiar tu vida. It is about that lose the control, because
Right.
cancer is teaching you. It is about losing the control.
Oh, and we don't like that. We like to be in charge.
Yes. and there's no control about the emotions of the rest of the people or how your body's reacting to
Right.
medications or foods or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great teacher for losing control. That's something that just occurred to me right now.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. It's, and so then we transfer that to other things that we want to be in control of. Like I said, my mom came out from Kansas to be in control. And that, I mean, that's her personality. She was always the person in charge. But she was just, she was going to whip everybody into shape and all that. And that was not going to happen. In fact, she was going to whip me into shape. And I'm like, no, no. But it's, and whether anytime it's a serious illness, I mean, heart, whatever it is, we have all of these really confusing, might be the best way to put it, confusing emotions that we go through. And part of we don't want to make other people feel bad. Back to the how are you doing? I'm fine. I don't want people to know I'm not feeling fine. So I'm going to tell them I am. I don't want to burden them. I don't want them to feel bad. And so it's very confusing to know how to get through this. And that comes back to the honesty portion. We can't, even if you just say, today's not really a good day. You don't have to go into detail. But now, if, they might ask, and then you can choose. Do you want to tell them more? Do you not want to tell them more? But one of the things that I had done when I was so sick in the hospital, I didn't want anybody near me. I didn't want anybody to come see me. So there was my family, but that was it. I didn't want anybody else to see me like that. And then, of course, I wisened up. And I realized I'm a social creature, right? You can tell that. And I needed people to come and see me. And this was 9 years ago, so we didn't really do live streams or things like that. And I knew it was hard for people to come see me. Like I said, I looked pretty rough, but I needed that social connection. I have a friend she was just diagnosed for, I think, the 4th time. And I contacted her and I said, when do you want me to come over? I will come over. And she said, well, and I said, it's entirely up to you. I don't want to force you into anything. And she said, everybody's ignoring me. And I said, when do you want me over there? And, and I've told her, you call anytime, night or day, it's, even if she doesn't, she knows she could. And I think that's part of that too, is, how can we provide that support and at least let them know that we're there if they need us?
yes, that is important because many people don't ask even for the help because they don't feel that also they deserve it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The deserve part is where you have to remind them it's like you are important.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right.
deserve my attention, my ear, my shoulder, whatever it is.
Right. And we have to be specific when we're asking for help too. When I got out of the hospital, I was in the hospital for 7 weeks. And that's a long time, And so one of the things that the doctors told me was, you've got to take walks, right? Mother Nature is a great healer. And I needed sunshine and I needed fresh air. I was also weeble wobbly. I was using a walker. I mean, I could not go by myself, and my husband had gone back to work. And so I put on Facebook, walkers needed, 15 to 20 minutes per day, leash provided. and even if people couldn't come do it, they thought that was fun. And I did have people who came and took me for walks. But by making light of it, that worked. But I also had to be specific. They didn't know. We none of us read minds, or most of us don't. And I mean, sometimes we can look at people and kind of tell they might be needing something, or we can listen to their tone, things like that. But most of the time people need some hints. They needed to be told, I needed somebody to come walk me.
Yeah, that's a good reminder because everybody thinks like, oh, I believe that person knows what they need. We need to ask. They may need very
Right. And if they say no, well, they say no. I mean, it's not the end of the world. You're not asking for something that's going to be catastrophic.
Yes, and I know you're an entrepreneur and you're a podcaster too. your channel podcast that is about business.
It is.
And there's one of the points that you put me that I read, and it's like, this is very, very interesting. It says, business don't get cancer or today. And I thought that this is a great question to ask because we know we have seen many business fail and things like that. In a way, it is in some magnitude because you open another business and again, and
Right.
we call them cancer or salty business.
Right. And whether it's, it's interesting. You mentioned I'm a podcaster, and I interviewed a guest earlier today on how to make your workplace happy. What a fun concept, right? And he talks about how, it's for many people, it's a job. We go to make the money so we can go do whatever else that we want. And the goal for the employer should be, how can we make it a place they want to be at? And and when we have those situations or those people, right, who are the ick people, they're the negative people, all of those are kind of those cancers. So how can we deal with them? And it was very interesting, when I was so sick, I worked almost the entire time. I what I do is virtual, and so as long as I had Wi-Fi, I could keep working. And so, but to me, it kept my mind going. It gave me something to focus on. And and I didn't want my business to, in essence, be sick. I wanted it to be healthy and to continue. And I tell people, hospitals and doctors' offices have really good Wi-Fi. And I mean, I was sitting, in my treatment room yesterday working because I had my phone. But yeah, it's what can we do for our businesses to make sure that they are healthy? How are we treating our employees? All of those various things that sometimes we don't even think about, because it's like, well, they're just here to work. Well, you can still make it so they enjoy it. And you can have empathy for them, what's going on in their lives, all of those various things. As we record this, there's been some pretty stressful things that have happened this week, right? And in the in the world, and people are feeling that, and we need to let them feel that, and recognize that they're going to be feeling that and dealing with that.
That is so true because yes, we tend to, we're fine. We go, fine, and we're fine until we're not fine. And that's when really things going wrong. It can be in a personal level, it can be a state level, national or international. It can be in all the levels because we're not, or we're trying to distract too much ourselves.
Right.
I am a workaholic too, that tendency. And sometimes it's like, okay, why am working so hard in this moment that I am grieving, or that I'm angry, or that I'm sad, or that I'm whatever emotion, lower emotion that I have. And like, oh, because I don't want to think about it.
Right.
I have to resolve it if I down and actually think about it. To ignore it with a lot of work.
Yeah. The busy work, as we put it, right? Gonna stay busy, stay busy, stay busy.
So I don't think about it and I don't have to resolve to actually it's on top of me that I have to deal with this.
Right.
But to a point that's healthy at the same time.
I think when we push things off like that, it's not healthy, because they will come back and get us. And now granted, there's things that we just can't fix, right? We can't fix that somebody did something horrible in New Orleans. We can't fix the war in Ukraine, all of these various things. But maybe it's just, we're going to sit and spend 10 minutes sending them healing thoughts, or prayers. People kind of scoff, anymore at we're sending thoughts and prayers. I think it helps. I certainly know when I know that people are praying for me and sending me healing thoughts, I feel that. I know that I have that going on. And so, maybe we can't directly affect something, but sometimes, there are ways, and there are other things that we can be doing in our own little worlds to make things better.
Yes. And well, or something it is at a personal level, well, that you have to resolve something and you're putting it off and overwork
Right.
and try not to think in that stress just for a different stress. It doesn't work.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, maybe you might be needing to make a personal decision, or you know, that you might not be wanting to do. Finances, right? Finances are always an icky thing that, yeah, you know, and so you just don't want to think about it. You know, my husband just retired, and so that's been a very interesting time of our lives, to be thinking about, okay, you know, if we live another 30 years, are we going to be living the way we want to be living? And you know, and of course, finances are, what do they say, you know, the biggest thing that couples fight about. We actually did okay, you know, but it is, you know, what are those things that we're putting off? And sometimes it's you know, other things, you know, I'm going to keep focusing on this so I don't think about going to the doctor, or I don't think about a friend of mine who's sick or whatever. You know, I'm just going to keep working. And you know, it's, again, it's not healthy to be ignoring those things.
I totally agree. Because sometimes you just take that time and ask yourself in your body, how do I feel?
Right.
Not only the neighbor. And like, yes, I can ask later to the neighbor, but it is important first to ask me.
Right.
What do I need? How do I feel?
Mm-hmm.
Those things are very, very important too.
Yeah. The shower is a good place to cry, right? And yell and do all sorts of things. Nobody knows what's going on in there. And you know, and then you kind of get that out of your system, and you go on.
That's one way. That's one way to do it. And or simply talk to the people that you need to set your boundaries.
Right.
And that will resolve the half of the problems that majority of people have. The
Right.
100% problems that we have, if we set a boundary, oh, we have already 45 problems resolved.
Right. You know, and it is, to me, it's a sign of strength when we reach out and say we need help. You know, and so it might be, you know, a counselor, it might be a friend, it might be, you know, a religious person, whoever it is. It's okay to reach out and say, this is what's going on. I'm feeling like I need to talk about this. You know, and I think it's scary, right? Because we're thinking, what if they tell us they don't want to talk to you? And so, you know, obviously some of those people have to, you know, you're paying them to, you know, be a therapist or whatever.
Their job.
But yeah, you know, but I think what a lot of times what we discover is they've needed to talk too. You know, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, we insulate ourselves. You know, we might read all about it on Facebook or watch it on the news or whatever, but we don't want to talk about it. You know, and it's okay to do that. And like I said, to me, it's a sign of strength to say, hey, I need to talk about this.
And that is so, so common into entrepreneurs. We're talking about coaches, healers, and so forth. We're listening to the people every day, all day, for a bunch of emotions, and obviously they're paying you for doing that. So you keep it to yourself, you keep bottling and bottling and bottling. And until you get really sick.
Right. Who coaches the coach?
Exactly. So it is important to the coach to actually look for support. Even psychologists, a psychiatrist, they need someone else. They need support. Everybody needs support. And if we don't ask for it, is because of also of the fear of judgment. It's like how the coach is gonna ask for help. It's like maybe he's not a great coach. It is human. We have to understand that everybody's having a human experience.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It is a guru. He's gonna still need help. It's still it's still a human being.
Yeah, you know, and especially I worry about my medical people that I deal with, because they're dealing with horrible, awful things. And you know, and who do they talk to? You know, my kidneys have been damaged through all of this, and so I have a nephrologist, and she's a wonderful woman. And I was in one time for a checkup, and the walls are paper thin. I could hear everything that was going on in the room next door with another patient. And it was a very bad, very sad conversation. It was, it was not a good one. And she came in and I could tell. And, her shoulders were kind of slumped, and she sat down, and I said, "How are you?" And she kind of shook herself and she said, "Oh, no, I'm supposed to be asking you that." And I said, "That's okay. We'll get to me. How are you?" And she said, "Nobody ever asks." And I said, "Well, I know you can't tell me, and because of HIPAA and all those various things, but it meant the world to her just that I said, 'How are you?' Do you need to take a couple minutes and kind of gather yourself?" And she said, "Yeah, nobody asks."
Yep. Because everybody's about themselves. Without
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and we think, like you were saying, it's their job. They're supposed to deal with that. Well, who heals the healers?
yes. And we need to learn also to say, I need help.
Mm-hmm. Right. Before something bad happens.
Yes. Because that's one way that we can get sick and
Mm-hmm.
real sick.
Right. Right.
We
Yeah. I
have
mean,
to,
how many, we've seen caregivers, whether they're a coach, whether they're medical, whatever, they develop ulcers, they get sick, they have other really bad things that happen. And so, yeah, because they just keep kind of taking it on and taking it on, and they need to offload it.
that is so true because yes, and we need to not be afraid to be vulnerable to other people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
That's the freeness. It's like if I show myself vulnerable, the people are
Mm-hmm.
going to think that I'm weak.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I'm going to hide it.
Mm-hmm.
But hiding at the part is
Mm-hmm.
actually where all the illness can
Mm-hmm.
come to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I got lupus. That's how we all
Mm-hmm.
got sick.
Right. Yeah, you had just kind of. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I used to be the person that I used to have to show myself always strong and the problem
Mm-hmm.
solver for
Mm-hmm.
everybody until it got to the point that it was too much for me and my
Mm-hmm.
body.
Mm-hmm. Right. And our bodies are very smart, right? They're going to tell us either by getting sick or collapsing, or maybe it's a mental health issue, something like that. And and then we ignore it, right? And we just keep getting worse and worse. And I tell people, like I said, I nap. That's one of the best ways for our bodies to heal ourselves. We need sleep. That's when your body kind of relaxes. Obviously, exercise, good food, having great conversations, things like that. But sleep does so much for people. And we hear these people who say, "Oh, I'm such a business person and I'm so driven. I only sleep 3 hours a night." That is not good for you. I don't care if you're working, that's not good for you.
I agree there, but there is also right now a big issue worldwide that people are not sleeping because they have
Mm-hmm.
worries
Mm-hmm.
and things
Mm-hmm.
going on in their
Right.
head. So they go to
Mm-hmm.
sleep, they cannot sleep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for that, I will advise to everybody like write it down, have
Mm-hmm.
a notebook, write it down, put it
Right.
there. Tomorrow you can
Mm-hmm.
go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Right.
not you're gonna be
Mm-hmm.
oh
Oh yeah, our minds, and mine does that. My mind just doogity 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 doogity, all the time. And I think that's where some people, and I've not done this, but I know some people, the gratitude journals, things like that, where the last thing they think of is something very positive. I can do that, and then my brain will go, yeah, but you know, um, but that takes discipline, and I'm just undisciplined. But it's it, we need to give ourselves what we need. We've been saying that, and and yeah, what do we need to, and I'm not one that says, hey, take a drug, right? But sometimes you might need a little bit of help to get your body to relax. But meditation and things like that, yoga, hard exercise, right? You exercise really hard, you're going to go to sleep. And so what can you do to kind of help your brain calm itself?
Yes. I am I am the one that goes to meditation to sleep.
Mm,
Help
mhm,
me tremendously to go to
mhm,
sleep.
mhm,
It's like I've seen so many people going around with medications and so
mhm,
forth for going to sleep.
mhm.
That becomes an addiction. Later on, you cannot
Right.
sleep without it,
Mhm,
and that creates more problems for your
mhm. Right.
body.
Oh yeah.
Minor
Yeah. And of course that's in many ways, especially our Western medicine. If you say I'm having trouble sleeping, they immediately want to prescribe something.
Yes.
And it's like, no, I just needed to tell you I'm having trouble sleeping. I don't need you to fix it. I just needed to tell you that. And but it also, that's part of that being honest. Okay. Maybe it's your medicine, you're taking your medicine at the wrong time. And so it's making you stay awake or, things like that. So it's okay to discuss it, but prescriptions shouldn't be the first thing, or maybe not even prescription. Medicating maybe not be the first thing that you're trying.
Yes, I totally agree. And there's so many holistic alternatives
Right.
that not necessarily are narcotics. It's
Hmm.
great. It is natural, so it's not gonna create an addiction to that.
Hmm. Hmm.
The heavy duty medications are the ones that are gonna create an addiction that later
Hmm.
on you cannot sleep if you don't take the medication.
Hmm. Right.
It is important to find alternatives, like you said,
Hmm.
exercise, meditation to sleep.
Hmm.
Don't eat before you go to bed,
Hmm.
because or else your body
Right. You just turned your engine back on by eating.
or the screen time or things like
Hmm.
that. There are
Right.
alternatives.
Yeah. Put your phone down, folks. You know? And now, saying that, I sleep with the TV on. And it's just I kind of need that white noise. But I have learned that I need to put it on like the History Channel where they have the very soothing voices, right? I don't put it on crime and things where they're going to be yelling and screaming. And but I also have sleep music that I listen to, things like that. And because I I'm not disciplined enough to calm my brain on my own. Could I be? Sure, if I worked at it. That sounds hard, you know. But yeah, it is something, and it's funny because my husband does not like having the TV on. He needs quiet, and so that's kind of a battle that we have on occasion. But we work it out.
Yeah. And the snoring part.
Oh, I know. Oh, he snores. God bless him. He snores. And and now here's, we talk about sometimes these things have benefits. So I've had multiple surgeries. And so I've been intubated many times. And I used to snore really bad. I don't snore any longer. Having that tube going down my throat so many times made it so I don't snore. Yay!
That is a good one.
I know I told my doctor that and they just looked at me and shook their head.
Whatever it works, because oh my gosh, for the partners, it is sometimes hard.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
don't sleep because of that.
Mm-hmm.
But well, but that yes. And you mentioned over here that you have your bedside manners,
Mm-hmm.
manner matters.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean with that?
I kind of mentioned it before that doctors tend to think that we are our diagnosis, or that we are. I tell people I am a person. I'm not a patient. Now I get that it's very stressful for them, just like we've been saying, and they can't. Well, for one thing, they're told you will see X number of patients in an hour, or whatever it is, and but a lot of times they tend to kind of put a wall up, right? Because they don't want to feel what's going on. And the when I first got very ill, I had to have emergency abdominal surgery, and the surgeon saved my life. I know he saved my life. He had the worst true bedside manner ever. Horrible, awful. There was a reason that man dealt with people who were unconscious, you know, and so I ended up switching to his partner, who, when he came in so he was doing rounds, and he came in and he said, "Do you have any questions?" And I said, "You know what, I do." And he pulled up a chair, and an hour later, he was still there. And he said, I'm not going anywhere till your questions have been answered. Now, his wife has breast cancer. So, and he is one of those people that when you say his name in this medical community, people go, ooh. I mean, he's just, I tell people I would walk on fire for him, and everybody would. I mean, but he has that bedside manner where that for whatever that time period is, you are the focus of his attention. He's not thinking about other patients. He's not thinking about anything else. And I think that's one of the things that is a challenge because they don't teach it in medical school. How to feel empathy without going overboard, without getting consumed by it. And one of the times when I went for a checkup, the third cancer that I had was last summer. I had thyroid cancer. And so they removed my entire thyroid. And I was in for a checkup, and I heard the young lady out in the hall say, the thyroid cancer is in room 4. And I went out and I said, excuse me, I am not the thyroid cancer. I said, now I get HIPAA. I know you can't call out my name. And I said, but please don't just refer to me as my diagnosis. And they apologized profusely. And I'm pretty sure as soon as I left that, they went back to doing the same thing. But, I tell them, treat me like you want your mother, your sister, your wife, your whoever treated. I do get called in to speak to students, and and I tell them it's okay to spend just that little extra time, because when they spend that little extra time with us, we're going to be more likely to tell them what's really going on. If I'm, if I know that the doctor couldn't care less, then I'm not going to tell him, hey, this is what's going on, right? But if I know the doctor cares, I'm going to say, well, here's what's going on. I've been feeling this. I've been worried about this. And now I know that I'm chatty Kathy, and they see me coming and they're like, oh, we just got, she's a long appointment. But I'm conscious of that. I try to not take too much of their time. But yeah, it's they and that's one of the things that I tell people with the initiative I started is our medical people are just a part of our team. They're not the people in charge. They're a part of that team. And we have to get the team members that work the best for us. I fired doctors. Like I said, that first surgeon, nope, he was gone. I was not going to deal with that man again. And several other doctors, I've said, no, you're just not. And they were good doctors. But, we have to get the people around us and whatever level it is, who are going to provide us with the best care and the best treatment. And that also means, like, not only just getting rid of doctors, maybe it's friends, maybe it's coworkers, maybe it's whoever, the gloomy doomies, right? And maybe they're not gloomy doomy about you, but I don't need them to come in and tell me that the world is coming to an end.
Or they come in, and instead of talking about you, they talk about politics.
Yeah. Oh no. Go away. Shoo. Yeah.
I mean, so many doctors that is like, okay, where do I go to a doctor with a sign that says, it is about me, it is not about the nation. I don't want to talk about politics. I come to the doctor.
Right. One of the reasons I love my oncologist is they have a sign in every exam room, and they're a very big practice. And it says, every room says, if your questions have not been answered, do not leave this room. And I think that's one of the things, because we get in there and we freak out, right? You were talking about it before, that when we have, especially when we're first told that you have cancer, your brain just shorts out. So take somebody with you, write things down, record them. I had a doctor that said, oh, you can't record it. That's a HIPAA violation. I said, I can most definitely record my visit. I can't record somebody else's. And they looked at me and I said, I know the law. And to me, that was kind of a red flag, right? They weren't wanting that record of, and so I don't know that, but yeah, we're the people in charge. And our medical team is just part of that. And it's all of them. It's, it might be nutritionists, mental health people, yoga, meditation, all of those. That's all part of this healing process. And we have to, I tell people, I'm a warrior. I'm in the fight for my life. But more importantly, warriors never go alone. They always have a tribe. And so, who is going to be your tribe and who's going to help you the most? And if they're not going to help you, wish them well and send them on their way.
So beautiful. Oh, Deb, it's been such an interesting conversation that I hope everybody gets lift their spirits, and don't forget to get out of the automatic.
Mm-hmm.
So like that, they can actually have a real conversation with themselves and with others,
Mm-hmm.
and ask them what they need or provide them the need, whatever
Mm-hmm.
they see they need. This has been very, very interesting. Thank you so much for being
Oh,
on the talk.
thank you.
Do you have some last words that you would like to say?
I would tell people, just remember, you are in charge. You have to be your own advocate. You have to do what you feel is best for you, not what other people tell you is best for you, in whatever it is, cancer, life, whatever.
Yes, relationships, etc.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most definitely, right? Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And to everybody, thank you for being here. And is this episode of Soul Talk, it was helpful for you, share it, please. One of your friends might be interested to listen to this. Thank you so much. And don't forget to click like and subscribe and leave us a comment. Thank you so much. The information of that, it is going to be down below. So like that, you can get a hold of her Facebook, in her podcast, also, or in LinkedIn and or her webpage. Thank you so much. This is Monica Ramirez, the Warrior of Love, and thank you for being in Soul Talk.